Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Mrinmoy Pramanik. I teach comparative Indian language and literature at the University of Calcutta. Today we'll discuss the equivalence and methodologies of translation, and the content of this discussion is written by Mr. Rindan Kundu. Now let us discuss about the introduction of this equivalence of translation and equivalence as translation methodology. Before going deep into the theory of equivalence, let us start from the lexicographical meaning of the term equivalence. What does this very word actually mean? Equivalence, according to the Chambers Etymological Dictionary, means thing equal in value. So we can say equivalence in translation studies does mean a relationship of equal value, which is possible to some extent between source text and the target text. The theory has never said that the whole target text or translated text has the same value as the source text in form or function or value or whatever. Equivalence has always posited a relationship of equal value or sameness on some level in whichever means is possible between a source text and a target text. The theory does never force the target text to be same or exact like the source text. So the target text need not be symmetrical or reversible to the source text. Now the important point is that where does the equal value lie? Is the value in form, or is the value rest in the aesthetics, or in the length of the text, or the value lies in the qualities of the text, or in the effect or usage of the text? Should we compare the effect on original text to reader with the target text to reader, or should we contrast the function of the source text on source culture with the function of the target text on the target culture? All these important questions are related to the paradigm of equivalence and subjected to analyze in the following sections. Now let us talk about historical overview of equivalence theory. Keeping aside the perennial debate between liberal translation and literal translation, we can say that the theoreticians around 1950s and 1960s have given primacy to systematic analysis of translation depending upon linguistic issues. In this module, we shall probe into works on equivalence theory by major theoreticians over the decades. In order to proceed chronologically, we shall start with Vinay and D'Arbelnet, 1958, and then follows Jacobson, 1959, Naida and Tabor in 1969, Catford in 1965, Popovic in 1976, Kohler in 1979, Newmark in 1981, House in 1997, and then end with Pine in 2010. Now let us discuss about Vinay and D'Arbelnet's idea of equivalence. The basic schema of Jean-Paul Vinay and Jean D'Arbelnet, as discussed in their seminal joint venture Stylistico Compari du Français de Anglais 1958, is that equivalence-oriented translation is an operation that replicates the same situation as in the original whilst using completely different wording, Vinay and D'Arbelnet says. According to their interpretation, if this procedure mentioned above is applied during the process of practical translation, it can maintain the stylistic impact of the source language text in the target language text. They distinguish the translating process between two categories, namely direct and oblique translation, which harks back the classical debate between literal and liberal translation process. Translators can choose from two methods of translating, namely direct or literal translation and oblique translation. They further added that, I quote, because of structure or metalinguistic differences, certain stylistic effects cannot be transposed into the target language without upsetting the syntactic order or even the lexis. In this case, it is understood that more complex methods have to be used, which at first may look unusual, but which nevertheless can permit translators a strict control over the reliability of their work. These procedures are called oblique translation methods. In the listing which follows, the first three procedures are direct and the others are oblique. I unquote. So amongst the 7 procedures listed by the 2, the direct translation, or conceptually which stands for the literal translation, covers 3. Borrowing source language word is transferred directly to the target language, sometimes added with local flavor. The calque, or a special kind of borrowing where the source language expression or structure is transferred in a literal translation, and the literal translation, which is word for word translation, most common between languages of the same family and culture. Now the second strategy, namely the oblique translation, must be practiced when the direct translation method cannot be applicable. This method covers the rest of the 4 procedures: transposition, or the change of one part of speech for another without changing the sense; the modulation, or change of the semantics and point of view of the source language; then the equivalence, or change of the same situation by using different stylistic or structural means, particularly useful in translating idioms, proverbs; and lastly adaptation, or changing of cultural reference when a particular situation in the source culture does not exist in the target culture. Vinay and Darbelnet have also argued that the equivalent expressions are only acceptable until they finally become fully accepted, in the sense that bilingual dictionaries list them as full equivalents, and concluded with by saying the need for creating equivalences arises from the situation, and it is in the situation of the source language text that translators have to look for a solution. But in the very next page, they have admitted that the scope of equivalences is wider, and that such collections, lexicons and dictionaries can never be exhaustive. So they have understood at the end that finding an equivalent expression of the source language text from the dictionary and replacing it into the target language text is not sufficient enough to accomplish a successful translation. The surrounding situation or context of the source language text is equally important in the translation process, and the translator therefore first understood the situation of the source text and then look for an equivalent term for similar or parallel situation in target culture. Next we will discuss about Roman Jakobson, our linguist and formalist. It is a well-known and well-attested fact that following the Ferdinando de Saussure's theory of signifier, the spoken and written signal, and the signified, the concept signified, Roman Jakobson, in his seminal essay on linguistic aspects of translation, broadly categorized the process of translation as intralingual, or rewording or interpretation of verbal signs by means of other signs within the same language; interlingual, or translation proper or interpretation of verbal signs by means of some other language; and intersemiotic, transmutation or interpretation of verbal signs by means of non-verbal sign system. According to Saussure, the relationship between a signifier and a signified is completely arbitrary and unmotivated except a few onomatopoeic words. Thus the English word house and the French word maison are the acoustic signifiers which both denote to a specific structure to live in. Borrowing this concept from Saussure, Jakobson then moves towards the concept of equivalence, and according to him, there cannot be exact equivalence between two words. I quote, "On the level of interlingual translation, there is ordinarily no full equivalence between code units, while messages may serve as adequate interpretation of alien code units or messages. The English word cheese cannot be completely identified with its standard Russian heteronym sir, because cottage cheese is a cheese but not a sir." I conclude the quotation. So from a grammatical point of view, Jakobson argued two different languages may differ in whatever degrees, but that does not lead towards the untranslatability. rather he acknowledges the translator's subjectivity in taking right decisions about choosing the right structure and terminology. If we go through the aforementioned theories on equivalence, Despoina Panov argues that there are distinctive similarities between Vinay Darbelnet's theory and Jacobson's. They both adopt the linguistic model and argue that though there are linguistic and cultural differences in two separate languages, yet translation is always possible between source language and target language. And in the process of a translator's role is crucial because he is the one who would be responsible to ensure a more effective and comprehensive rendering of the source text message in the target text. Now let us talk about Nida and Tabor. And I think you know that Nida is most significant or popularly discussed figure on the theory of equivalence. Eugene Nida is well known in the field of translation studies as a Bible translator and theoretician. His two famous books are Toward a Science of Translating, which was published in 1964, and the co-authored The Theory and Practice of Translation, Nida and Tabor, which was published in 1969, attempts to a scientific analysis of problems related to translation. He was greatly influenced by Noam Chomsky's generative transformational grammar and tries to ensure a more systematic approach to exploring the fields of translation studies. Edwin Ganchler, in his contemporary translation theories in 2010, argues that Nida drew on extensive field work that showed that the religious message is often failed to be communicated because of different cultural context and worldviews. Thus, Nida came to understand that meaning cannot be divorced from the personal experience and the conceptual framework of the person receiving the message. He concluded that ideas must be modified to fit with the conceptual map of experience of the different context. So, Nida's purpose as a religious Protestant Bible translator is to affect the appropriate response, one which will start a dialogue not between the receiver and the text or symbols, but between the receiver and the God. According to him, there can be two types of equivalence, namely formal equivalence and dynamic equivalence. His entire attention is on the message itself in both form and content. Formal equivalence. Formal equivalence supposes that a target language item represents the literal equivalent of a source language item, whereas dynamic equivalence is a translation principle according to which a translator seeks to translate the meaning of the original in such a way that the target language wording will trigger the same effect or impact on the target language audience as the original wording did upon the source text audience. But dynamic equivalence is admissible as long as the change follows certain rules and regulations. Firstly, back transformation in the source language or back translation of a translated text back into the language of the original text. Secondly, a contextual consistency in the transfer, and lastly, a faithful transformation in the receptor's language. Dynamic equivalence is based upon the principle of equivalent effect. Here, the source language and target language text are not compared for correspondence, and the translator is under no obligation to reproduce the cultural underpinnings of the original. What the translator tries to do is to reproduce the text such that the target language reader can relate to it in a different cultural context. This does give considerable freedom to the translator as he is given a wider range. Despite using a linguistic approach to translation, Nida is much more interested in the message of the source text, its semantic quality. Therefore, the translator must make sure that the message is clear and exact in the target text. According to him, differences in translations can generally be accounted for by three basic factors in training. 1. The nature of the message. 2. The purpose or purposes of the author and by proxy of the translator. And number 3. The type of audience. Now let us talk about Catford. Catford's main contribution in the field of translation studies lies in the introduction of his idea of types and shifts of translation. Shifts refer to the changes that take place during the translation process, argued Desponia Pano. According to J.C. Catford, shifts refer to the changes that take place during the translation process, and he has also categorizes in his book titled A Linguistic Theory of Translation, an essay in applied linguistics, which was published in 1965, the nature of translation equivalence in broad types in terms of the extent, levels and ranks of translation. Firstly, full translation is contrast with partial translation in terms of extent of translation. Catford defines that in a full translation, the entire text is submitted to the translation process. That is, every part of the source language text is replaced by target language text material. In a partial translation, some part or parts of the source language text are left untranslated. They are simply transferred to and incorporated in the target language text. Secondly, total translation, which is very much contrasted with restricted translation in terms of levels of language involved in translation. By total translation, we mean what is most usually meant by translation. That is, translation in which all levels of the source language text are replaced by target language material. By restricted translation, we mean replacement of source language textual material by equivalent target language textual material at only one level. That is, translation performed only at the phonological or at the graphological level, or at only one of the two levels of grammar and lexics. Thirdly, rank-bound translation. A rank-bound translation is contrasted with unbounded translation in terms of grammatical or phonological rank at which equivalence is established. In rank-bound translation, an attempt is made always to select target language equivalents at the same rank. A free translation is always unbounded. Equivalences shunt up and down the rank scale, but tend to be at the higher rank, sometimes between larger units than the sentence. Catford also claims that though relations between languages are regarded as two-directional but not always symmetrical, translation as a process is always unidirectional from a source language into a target language, and the definition of translation is the replacement of textual material in one language by equivalent textual material in another language. He has also stated that the central task of every translation is to find out the right equivalent in target language and also to define the nature and conditions of translation equivalence. Moreover, he defines notion of shifts as departure from formal correspondences when translating from the source language to target language, as well as categories to types of shifts. So first one is level shift. And what is level shifts? Level shifts is where an source language item at one linguistic level or grammar has the target language equivalent at a different level or lexis. And category shift. Category shift is again further divided into four. Structure shift, which is involving changes in class. Unit shift, which is involving changes in rank. Class shifts involving changes in class. And intra-system shifts occur internally when the source language and target language systems share the same constitution but a non-corresponding term in the target language is selected when translating. Catford remarks, each language carries with it its own meaning, since message is property of a language. Now let us discuss about Popovic. Equivalence in translation is for Anton Popovic, as he describes in his dictionary for the analysis of literary translation, which was published in 1976. The correspondence of the means of expression between the original and the translation, which is the point of intersection of the paradigmatic and the syntagmatic equivalence. He distinguishes translation equivalence into four types of equivalences. One is linguistic equivalence or equivalence at linguistic level or word for word translation, and the second is paradigmatic equivalence or equivalence of elements of grammar, which according to Popovic is a higher category than lexical equivalence. Stylistic equivalence. Stylistic equivalence is translational equivalence or the functional equivalence of elements in the original and in the translation. Next is textual equivalence or equivalence in form or shape. Then Kohler. Whether and what and to what degree equivalence can be achieved depends on the interplay of many different factors. In an attempt to systematize all these factors, a small number of different equivalence frameworks have been proposed by German scholar Werner Kohler in his introduction into the science of translation, which was published in 1979, who identifies the five most important ones as follows. One is denotative equivalence, the extra linguistic real word reference to which the text relates in the sentences, like the capital of Italy is Rome, and the words Rome and German Rom have the same denotations and are thus denotatively equivalent. Second one is connotative equivalence. The connotations conveyed in the text, that is the culturally normative feelings or associations evoked by a specific term or phrase and by different levels of usage or styles of social and geographical dialects. The connotations evoked by the term breakfast in an English speaking context may differ radically from the associations this term evokes in Islamic countries during Ramadan. Next is text normative equivalence, the linguistic and textual norms of usage that characterize a particular text. Later layout differs widely across linguistic and cultural communities, and this needs to be taken account of in translation. Then next is pragmatic equivalence. Pragmatic equivalence is the recipients of the translation for whom the translation is specially designed so that it fulfills its special communicative function for the recipients. In a modern Italian translation of the Bible, we might find a reference to Jews riding into Rome on a Vespa instead of entering Jerusalem on a donkey. Fifth is formal aesthetic equivalence, or the aesthetic formal characteristics of the original text. If a translator succeeds in maintaining wordplay, rhymes, assonance, alliteration phenomena in the translation, she or he achieves formal aesthetic equivalence. Having classified different types of equivalence, Kohler then argues that a hierarchy of values can be preserved in translation only if the translator comes up with a hierarchy of equivalence requirements for the target text. Next, let us discuss about Newmark's idea of equivalence. Peter Newmark, through the Approaches to Translation, which was published in 1981, and Textbook of Translation 1988, replaces Snyder's terms of formal and dynamic equivalence with semantic and communicative translation, respectively. Semantic translation, as proposed by Newmark, focuses on meaning, whereas communicative translation focuses on effect. In other words, semantic translation looks back at source text and tries to retain its characteristics as much as possible, thus trying to satisfy the author of the source text, whereas communicative translation looks towards the needs of the target audience, thus trying to satisfy them. Newmark departs from Snyder's receptor-oriented line, feeling that the success of equivalent effects is illusory and that the gap between emphasis on source and target language will always remain as the overriding problem in translation theory and practice. So he suggests to narrow the gap by replacing the old terms with those of semantic and communicative translation. Though Newmark's description of communicative translation resembles Snyder's dynamic equivalence in the effect it is trying to create on the target text reader, while semantic translation has similarities to Snyder's formal equivalence. However, Newmark distances himself from the full principle of equivalent effect, since that effect is inefficient if the text is out of target language space and time. He also indicates that semantic translation differs from literal translation in that it respects context, interprets, and even explains. Literal translation, on the other hand, means word for word in its extreme version and even in its weaker form, sticks very closely to source text lexics and syntax. Now let us discuss about Hughes. Julian Hughes, in her book titled Translation Quality Assessment, A Model Revisited, which was published in 1997, has proposed a translation quality assessment model in which the basic requirement for equivalence of source text and target text is that the original and the translation should match one another in function, which should be achieved by employing equivalent pragmatic means. Therefore, the translation will then be considered as an adequate one in terms of quality if it matches with the textual profile and functions of the original. The purpose of translation, as she argues, is the preservation of meaning. She defines translation as the replacement of a text of a source language by semantically and pragmatically equivalent text in target language in order to achieve a functional equivalent translation. She has categorized two types of translation, namely overt translation, which is a kind of translation in which target text addresses are not directly addressed and also tied to the source language and culture intended to be recognized as translation and should remain as intact as possible. And then is covert translation, or a kind of translation that enjoys the status of an original source text in the target culture and also directly addressed to a target culture audience. So in her translation equivalence model, culture plays an important role, and the type of translation will depend on the aim of translation. Then the most recent theorist about the equivalence theory of translation studies is Anthony Pym, and Anthony Pym's book was published in 2010. Pym, in his Exploring Translation Theories, makes his own contribution to the concept of equivalence. Pym argues that there is no such concept as perfect equivalence between languages because no two languages can be exactly same. So this idea is quite revolutionary in the theory of equivalence, in the whole history of development of theory of equivalence. Therefore, it is always assumed equivalence. According to him, equivalence is a relation of equal value between a source text and a target text and can be established on any linguistic level from form to function. He then proceeds to differentiate between natural equivalence and directional equivalence. Natural equivalence supposes that the translator sees the equivalence problem, grasps the value and looks around the target language culture for the item of the same value. So the translator looks for an equivalent that exists already somewhere into the language and culture. This is called natural equivalence because the equivalent is presumed to exist prior to the act of translation. Directional equivalence supposes that the translator is actively going to create something new in the target language and culture which will maintain an equivalent relationship between the source culture and target culture. Now the important question is that if a translator goes from point A to point B, equivalent value to equivalent value, does the theory also assume that the translator can go back from B back to A? Can cricket in English culture be equivalent to baseball in American culture? So if a translator wants to replace cricket, he will look into the American culture for something similar and then finding baseball, replace it. Then the translator will ask the same question. Can he go back from baseball to cricket? Directional equivalence is the idea where there is no guarantee of a return. If the translator goes from a source text item to a target text item and there is no formal equivalent back in the source culture and language, then he will not get back to the same place. Equivalence is therefore unidirectional, and it is created by the translator through making choices between available alternatives. This is quite important because it recognizes from the beginning that what the translator does is not wholly determined by the source text, or that the source text opens the range of possibilities within which the translator has to form an action, and that action is somewhere unpredictable. This action and the unpredictability do not mean however that the outcome is not equivalent. It means that there are several kinds of equivalence to choose between, and therefore called directional equivalence. Now let us conclude the whole discussion. In conclusion, it could be argued that the theories on equivalence are based upon binaries. Vinay and Darby distinguishes between direct and oblique translation, Naida between formal and dynamic equivalence, Newmark between semantic and communicative equivalence, Hughes between overt and covert equivalence, and Pine between natural and directional equivalence. We have also seen how the linguistic oriented translation approaches soon faded away and cultural oriented translation theories came to the forefront, as well as translation studies has turned away from source text oriented approaches to target text oriented paradigm. Despite of its shortcomings, it should be stressed that equivalence is still one of the pivotal definitory axes of translation, since it functions as a reminder of the central problems a translator encounters during the translation process. And through this whole discussion, you can easily understand that the problem of equivalence is most significant problem in translation, especially in case of literary translation. That is why so many translation theorists talk about equivalence, and we can find growth and development, a complete history of equivalence in the studies of translation theory. Now you can find a list of further reading on the screen, and we conclude our discussion on this equivalent translation theory. Thank you.